All right. So, what I want to talk to you guys about today is carb cycling, what is carb cycling and what it's not. So, carb cycling is something that's thrown around a lot today, and a lot of people don't really understand the mechanisms behind it and what it's actually used for. So, today I'll be explaining why carb cycling is a fat loss tool. And like any other tool, there are certain ways to use it to maximize your progress while carb cycling.
Good.
So, let's see. What is carbs? Let's see. Let me if it'll go. So, yep. So, what is carb cycling? So, carb cycling is a fat loss strategy where caloric intake, which is mainly fluctuated up and down by carbs, is going to be modulated day to day based on the output and or a specific goal that you have. So, this can be used to manage hunger, performance or recovery. And this is specifically what I'm talking about today is going to be in a dieting phase. Now, you can use carb cycling anytime during a maintenance phase, a bulking phase, a fat loss phase, all year round if you want to. But what I'm specifically referring to today is going to be more or less so in the dieting phase. And so now, when we speak about carb cycling, what we're referring here to is, like I said, that modulation of, calories throughout the weeks, mainly carbs, right? But the biggest thing here, though, is the weekly average of that calorie intake is still going to be placing you in a deficit across the week. So, even if you have, several low days and maybe one or two high days during the week, you have to take that 7 day average of your, daily caloric intake across the whole 7 days, and you still should be in a deficit if you're, trying to do it for fat loss. So you don't have to be in a deficit every single day to see fat loss take place. So why would we even use carb cycling? Now, before we say this, I don't use this in every single client that I work with. I think it has to be client specific, whether A, they ask about it and they are intrigued about it, or number two, it's a good way to keep things interesting, I guess. Instead of just the very monotonous, straight through dieting to where everything is the same every single day until you make an adjustment, right? But mainly, carb cycling is used to help extend the fat loss phase when that straight dieting or linear dieting, if you want to call that, starts to feel more monotonous and harder to accomplish on a day-to-day basis. Essentially, is to help keep you a little more engaged, right? And maybe a little more attention to detail, right? Because if you have two separate meal plans or two separate macro plans and you have to adjust those, day to day based on what your output is going to be for the day, that can kind of keep you on your toes. Now, if you're a beginner, we're not going to do this right off the bat. If you're somebody that's brand new to the program, you don't really know a whole lot about, tracking macros, carb cycling at all. We could go the first 4 to 6 weeks is a very straight, linear based diet, and this is mainly to drive adherence first, because I cannot expect you to adhere to two meal plans or two macro plans if you can't adhere to the first one to begin with, right? So, like anything else, we don't know if the plan is working or if it's not working if we aren't adhering to it. So again, asking somebody to adhere to two different plans across the week, when they can't hold on to one is kind of asking a little much. But what carb cycling can do for us is it can reduce diet fatigue. It can support training output as well too. So it's going to, increase your performance in the gym. And this is going to improve adherence without overeating. So like a lot of people view these high days that they get as maybe not like a cheat day, maybe like a refeed day to where they're like, all right, these are my two treat meals during the week, right? To where like if I'm good, for 4 to 5 days a week and I'm hitting my low days, I'm going to get two high days to the point to where like it may feel that you're cheating on your diet because you're eating a lot more food, but in essence, you're still in that deficit. And then again, this will prevent any kind of like metabolic downshifting. So we always are concerned about if you're, dieting for a long, 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 long period of time, you're a chronic dieter, is essentially what I'm gonna call you. You just diet all year round. That metabolism is going to be, down regulated in some way, shape, or form. But this can help prevent that metabolic downshifting. So, and then mainly, like if we're looking at it from a biological standpoint, this can keep your thyroid and your leptin supported as well too. Now, the unchained rule when we look at carb cycling is going to be protein. So, protein does not cycle from day to day, it does not change. Now, this is going to be different than a refeed day, as in, if you use a refeed day, the protein can drop down to allow for a higher allotment for carb, which is mainly going to be used in that refeed day for a recovery, right? But this is not what we're after here. And the reason that we don't do that is protein is going to control your appetite. It's going to preserve the muscle mass that you already have. And in reality, it keeps those high days from turning into overeating episodes. So, if you have a high day and you lower your, protein amount down, well, you're also lowering that barrier of satiety, or maybe you're raising the barrier of satiety. You're going to be hungrier during the day, essentially. So, like, you may get in that mindset of, hey, I'm already eating a ton of food today. What's an extra 100, 200 calories, right? Well, in essence, that's going off plan, but keeping that protein the same, is going to more or less keep you in line, keep those hunger signals where they need to be as well too. So protein just needs to, a majority of the time stay the same. Now, like if you're at 200 grams of protein and you have to modulate, from a high day to a low day, and protein goes from 200 to 195 or 205, whatever, like that's not really that big of a change, right? Because it's going to change with other foods coming in and out, but don't go from like 200 to 160 kind of thing. Just keep it relatively close if all possible. Now, if we're talking about the low days, how we're going to explain those, our low days are what creates that weekly caloric deficit. So these days are specifically designed for fat loss, not performance at all. You should not expect to go into the gym and hit PRs on these days. These days during the week are just for targeted fat loss. Now, the carbs that you do have, in those days should be placed around training only. And now that there's a lot of different, schools of thought on this, and I think again it kind of varies person to person. You could do your low days on your rest days, or you could do them on your workout days, right? For me personally, what I like to do, and just from anecdotal experience from clients, I would like for you to do your low days on workout days, and then do your high days on rest days, to where we're actually prioritizing a recovery and using that food on those higher days to push a recovery, to kind of keep us going along during the week, right? So if you kind of think of it on the aspect of like filling a bucket, right? If you get to the end of your low days and you're drained, your bucket's empty, you use high days to fill that bucket back up, and there's going to be a slow leak during the week, right? That bucket is going to constantly get lower and lower and lower, but at the end of it, once it gets lower, just hang on, the high day is coming, right? So that's kind of how that I see things as well. Now, if we're talking about how do you structure a low day, what you want to do is, first off, you got to find where your maintenance calories are. And so, like, these low day calories are going to be about 80% of your maintenance calories. Keep your protein at 1 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, not lean body mass, just pure body weight. Fat should be moderate to low fats, anywhere from zero point 0.3 grams to zero point 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. And then carbs are going to be filled in what's left of that calorie allotment. And then if we swap on over to the high days are going to support recovery and hormone signaling. So these days are designed to improve training performance, refill those muscle glycogen stores. And this is why that I like to have them on a rest day. Because if you have a high day and you're going to go train legs, right? Well, you're just essentially, you're filling that bucket halfway up, right? Because you're going in there, you're having a very hard training session, and a lot of that food, that fuel, is going to go toward that a workout session. So having those high days on rest days, to me, is the best option. Now, again, there are other schools of thought to where people do their high days, on their highest priority. Um, training session days, or even the day before, which that's fine as well too. But if we're looking at it from an aspect of a recovery, which I think is one of the most underrated things, which involves sleep, things of the like that. To me, that's the best way to go about it. Now, how do we structure this? Is again, you have to know what your maintenance is, and we're going to go 105% of what your maintenance is. And so, protein is going to stay the same. It's the same as the low day. Now, fat is going to be a little bit lower, zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. This just keeps digestion smooth, keeps things going as well too. And then again, carbs, you're going to fill in the rest of your calories that you have allotted for the day into carbohydrates. Um, now again, just talking about down here, if you're going to do it, I prefer it on a rest day. Specifically, if you had the option to do this, do it the day before your hardest session. So like, if you train legs on Monday, right, and you have Sunday off, well, have your high day on Sunday. That's a complete rest day. You're gonna have your high day on Sunday, and then the next day you're hitting legs, right, your hardest session. So that's one way to look at that as well too. Now, there are several different examples of how that you could do a carb cycling, but this is the most common example that a lot of people use and the one that I honestly like to use. But this can really differ on like how many days a week that you're going to the gym if you want to get it like very dialed into what you're doing. So, for example, if your maintenance is at 2,100 calories, right? Now, we're going to do this example with about a 10% deficit here. So, we're going to say 1,850 calories. So if you do five, low days a week at 680 calories, and then you have two high days a week, which is 2,300 calories, that's going to come out to this weekly average of 1,850, which is a 10% deficit of what your maintenance calories should be. So you will be in a caloric deficit and able to lose body fat. So like this could look something like maybe if you train Monday, Tuesday, you take Wednesday off, you train Thursday, Friday, Saturday, have Sunday off, right? Well, Wednesday could be a high day and Sunday could be a high day. And then the other days that you're working out could be a low day. Now, other examples are like a three on, one off, essentially where, it's three low days and then a high day, and then it just repeats three more low days, another high day. Other examples are like three low days, four high days, and again, all this really depends on what your training output is gonna be, just to make sure that we're actually utilizing carb cycling to the best of our ability and not just throwing random numbers out there and just hoping that they stick. And then the last thing is how do you actually adjust? So it's all fine and dandy that you got your high and your low days, right? Well, at some point you're gonna stall, and a lot of people go to the high days first, and that's wrong. What you want to do is you want to look at your low days and use that as your initial lever to pull from. As my thought process is if you can pull 100 to 200 calories from your low days, I mean, you're already hungry. You're probably hungry to a degree, right? Let's just go ahead and pull some calories from the low days. That way that we can keep the high days as those, support days for a recovery. Because we have to keep in mind that low days are designed to drive weekly fat loss. High days are designed to, increase performance, improve adherence, support your thyroid and your leptin levels. And if we're pulling food away from the high days, that kind of defeats the purpose of having the high days. Now, at some point, you probably will have to adjust the high day down some once you get kind of deeper into it. But initially, if you're going to adjust the food, pick the low day first. That way that we're still, driving that weekly fat loss and we're using the low days as they're intended to be used for. Or we're keeping that calorie deficit rolling, throughout the week. And then we're also, driving that appetite and that insulin sensitivity signaling to a much better place as well too. So, and like I said, not everybody is going to be a good candidate to use carb cycling, but in an essence, I love using it for some people, and some people just benefit better off of straight linear dieting, which is what I like to do. It's just one less thing to worry about. Is it a low day? Is it a high day? But if you have issues with getting body fat off, that's a good method to at least give it a shot and see if that'll help your endeavors to get the body fat off, essentially. So, anybody got any questions with anything?
Actually, I have a question. My first
Yep.
time talking in a while.
Here.
Um, but there was one time I think it was during my cutting phase where I'm not sure if it was carb cycling that we did or not, but you might remember this better maybe. We increased carbs, decreased protein in order to, I think it was because I was lacking energy or losing strength at the gym, but it wasn't a high or a low. It was just like I think it was maybe like the last couple weeks. But is that another form of carb cycling as well?
I would say no, not really. Because if it's
Okay.
not, if it's not, I'm gonna get this word messed up, cyclical, across the
Mhm.
week, right? Then in essence, it's just a calorie adjustment. What it probably was, without going back and looking at yours, is we probably, I mean, I tend to always put protein a little bit higher on everybody's
I
plans.
was I was just gonna say that it was definitely a little higher than 1.2.
Yes, and I do that for a lot of reasons, but number one is it's going to be that protein is the most satiating nutrient out there. It's very high in thermogenesis as well too. So if you can tolerate the extra protein, I mean, cool deal. We're going to have it in there. But if it comes to an issue of like, hey, your gym performance is tanking, well, we have copious amounts of protein and not enough carbohydrate. Let's just modulate the protein down some. As long as it's at least, zero point 0.8 to 1, gram per pound of body weight, you can modulate that down and add that to the carbs. So let's just say if you had, 200 grams of protein, you're 100 and, 50-pound male, you could essentially pull 50 grams of that protein off. And then, since protein and carbs are both, 4 calories per gram. You could just move that 50 grams of protein from your meal plan into 50 grams of carbs. It's the exact same calories, but you're going to see a performance boost, I guess is the best way to put that. Instead of just you eating a lot of protein and it not doing anything for you in a training or performance aspect. I guess is the best way to put that.
Gotcha. And since we did do a drop of protein. If anything, I might see a drop or an increase in hunger, maybe. I don't think
Yes,
I
exactly.
did, but I'm pretty sure the main reason we did it was because, yeah, I was losing strength towards the end, and I was like, could use some more carbs.
Yep. And then, even at that point, like if you do get a little bit hungrier, then that's when you look at what your protein sources are. If you're intaking a lot of, protein shakes or things that aren't as, filling, you definitely could do that as well. Like a lot of people don't know that beef is one of the most, heavy, like satiating proteins out there. So if you're eating a bunch of chicken, you could always swap over to eating, maybe one of those meals as beef, and that beef is going to sit on your stomach a little bit longer and keep you fuller a little bit longer. Now, is it a huge amount longer? No, but I do know that if I eat beef kind of earlier in the day, my appetite kind of tapers. Like my appetite isn't as strong going into the next meal because beef tends to sit on my stomach kind of heavy and really for a lot of people as well. So that could be another
Gotcha.
thing to look at. So
Gotcha. Okay.
anybody else got anything?
Do you ever typically like move to like if somebody's been with you for, however long, do you ever move them to a carb cycling during like a prep phase or anything like that? If, they've been on a straight diet so far, or do you typically just kind of leave things the same or
When it comes
do?
to contest prep, me personally, I like to keep as many variables as we can the same,
Yeah.
just for the fact of, eventually we'll get to the point to where you're going to be ready early, and there's going to be several. refeed days in there as well too, to where it's going to be, day to day dependent of, hey, eat this amount of food today, no cardio today, your steps get cut in half today. It's like a day to day thing. And then if we're having to, backtrack of, all right, we're 4 days into the plan, you've had two low days, two high days. What's the average
Yeah.
calorie intake of this? This now has to go into the thought process of the refeed day. And to me, it's just easier to just have it all straight linear. That way they say, okay, yesterday Jacob had 2,000 calories as opposed to, all right, the day before he had 1,400 and then, yesterday he had 2,600. It can be done because, some coaches
Sure.
do it, but for me, I don't want to say that it makes it easier for me, but it kind of essence it does. It gives me a better
Yeah.
visual of like I have everything, just laid out in front of me instead of all right, well, we have this scenario and this
Hmm.
scenario. So like, I don't know, it just makes the thought process behind changing things a little easier.
Yeah.
So yeah, if that was directed to you, then yeah, we're probably not going to be doing any kind of carb cycling or for
Okay.
you in the contest prep.
I got you.
So anybody else got anything? Miss Chastity, anything from you today? Or are you good?
No, I'm good. I'm back on track, so we're
Okay.
good.
Well, good deal. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys showing up. If you got any other questions, please let me know. Um, and I will talk to you guys soon. Hope you guys have a great Thursday.